Welcome back to my next playthrough series. This time we're going back to Eldritch Horror. Last time I did this was, I think, like a year ago, but we are going to be going back again. I'll be doing again a two-player game because it's easier for me to keep track of two players than any more. Probably making mistakes as it is. I basically, up to this point, have all the expansions, and so there's a ton of variety now in the game, and we'll be playing with, like I said, two characters, so we'll take a look at them in a moment. This time we're playing against Cthulhu, or however you want to pronounce it. I just call it Cthulhu, and I have set everything up, and I'm not going to go through the setup of the game. We will look at Cthulhu, though. We're going to look at our characters. We're going to look at our reserve assets, and then I think we're just going to get right into the gameplay. There's lots of videos up right now of how to play, lots of playthroughs. I've already done one myself, so I'm not going to explain a lot. So let's take a look at Cthulhu and the opening mystery. Then we're going to look at our two characters that we'll be playing with, a little bit of the board, and then we're going to begin. All right, the great Cthulhu. And he has his own cultist ability. Of course, each of the elder gods has their own unique cultists when they come out. So this one, we'll worry about it when we see them. I've set up the Mythos deck according to how you set it up here. So that's our Mythos deck. And Cthulhu says, when an investigator moves onto a space containing an Eldritch token, he becomes delayed and loses one's sanity. And it says, when three mysteries have been solved, investigators win the game. And when Cthulhu awakens, flip the sheet over. All right, and our first mystery is the stars are right. It says, all around the world, Cthulhu's worshippers and those sensitive to his dreams have been plagued by madness. They rush to the sea to witness the Ancient One's return. When this card enters play, move each clue on the game board to the nearest sea space. Already did it as part of setup. After an investigator resolves a research encounter, he may spend one clue he has gained from that encounter and place this clue on the card. At the end of the Mythos phase, if there are clues on this card equal to the investigators, solve the mystery. So we're going to have to put two clues on here to solve the first mystery. And so we have the investigation deck for Cthulhu here when we investigate clues on the board, and a special deck for special encounters. We also, as part of the setup, had to set aside a deep one in the star spawn, and that's basically it. So now let's take a look at our two characters, starting first with Trish Scarborough. Okay, so here we have Trish Scarborough. She starts off with her starting equipment. She has 45 automatics, which give her +3 during combat. We're going to make her the lead investigator for round 1. She has 1 lore, 3 influence, 4 observation, 3 strength, 2 will, 7 health, and 5 sanity. I put tokens on when they get damaged instead of loading up the card with tokens and pulling them off, just so you know. As an action, it says if you do not have any clues, gain 1 clue, so that's pretty good. And her ongoing ability, if an investigator on your space spends a clue to reroll a die, he may reroll up to 2 dice instead, and that should include herself. So that's Trish Scarborough. She starts off out in the middle of Russia, in between Istanbul and Tunguska. We'll see her on the board here when we take a look at the board in a second. And now let's look at our second character for the game, and that's going to be Jacqueline Fine. All right, Jacqueline Fine. She's the psychic. And if I should have mentioned, of course, Trish Scarborough is the spy. So Jacqueline starts with 1 clue. As an action, it says she may trade a number of clues with any investigator on any space. So she can just give clues or take clues to anybody. Of course, in this case, it will be Trish because she's the only other character. Once per round, when an investigator gains a non-common condition, and I believe the only common condition is a debt, you may look at the back of that card and gain 1 clue. So if anyone becomes injured or goes mad or has hallucinations of any type, she's able to look at the back of the card and give a cryptic message as to what the ultimate fate of the character who doesn't look after that condition is going to be. She has lore of 4, influence 2, observation 3, strength of 1, will of 3, 4 health, so she's kind of weak health-wise, but 8 sanity. And she starts the game with Flesh Ward's spell, which is an incantation. It says once per round, when an investigator would lose health, when an investigator, so that's any investigator, you may test your lore. If you pass, prevent the investigator from losing up to 2 health, then flip this card. So that can be cast at a distance for any investigator, so Trish and herself. Those are our 2 investigators. So let's take a high-level look at the board, and I think we're going to do 1 turn for this episode. Of course, right before we do a high-level view, let's take a look at our reserve cards. Of course, we have the bank loan, which is always available. Take a debt condition and get 2 successes. We have a personal assistant, which is an ally, can gain +1 for influence, and you may reroll a die when doing influence tests. We have assassination. I like that card. It says when you gain this card, immediately choose a monster in any space. The monster loses 2 health and you discard this card. We have holy water, which is an item magical. You may discard this card to gain +5. What is that? Willpower and strength during a combat encounter. That is a lot. And as an action, you can discard this card to choose an investigator on your space to gain a blessed condition. So that's pretty cool. Blessed means if you roll a 4, 5, or 6, you have a success instead of just a 5 or 6. And we have the Cultist Journal, which is an item tome, magical, gain +2 willpower and +2 strength during combat encounters. That is, again, very powerful, but it costs you 3 to acquire it. All right, now we'll look at a high-level view of the board, and then I think we're going to start taking turns. All right, high-level look at the board, and here's how we have set it up. So I've shuffled all of the gate tokens. They are all here, and again, I have all the expansions now, so everything is going to be included. So there's 15 gates, I think, instead of the 12 that come with the original game. For the setup, of course, we're playing with 2 players, so we're using this setup. So we've spawned 1 gate, 1 clue token, and 1 monster on the gate. So the gate we have is in Rome. It is the red fire circle. Cthulhu starts way up at the top there at the Doom track on 12. Should mention that. Our expedition is currently in the Himalayas, right here. So Trish Scarborough starts up there, and we have Jacqueline Fine starting over there in the middle of America, mid-America. And I guess that's going to be it. Oh, and the monster we drew was the Mummy. The Mummy has this green symbol on it, which means you immediately flip it over. It says when this monster is spawned, you move it to the pyramid. So that's why the monster's at the pyramid. And this clue is now in the ocean. It appeared, I believe, up here. So the closest ocean space was there. That's part of the Cthulhu setup. So away we go. Trish Scarborough is the lead investigator. So I'm going to have to think here for a minute. We're going to have Trish take her actions. We have an action phase. Then we have an encounter phase, and then we're going to have a mythos phase. So let me come right back, and we're going to have Trish take her 2 actions. And of course, actions have to be unique. You can't take the same action twice. Okay, so the first action that we're going to have Trish do is her special action on her card. We can look at that again if we want. And it basically says if you do not have any clues, gain 1 clue. So she's going to do that as her first action. So she has no clues. We're just going to grab a random clue. Now she has a clue, and of course they're good for re-rolling. And for her second action, I do think she wants to move. And I think she's going to move 1 space to Istanbul, getting closer to the gate, where she can possibly next turn go and close the gate. That's basically her actions. Very quick, I know. Nothing too exciting going on there. Up next will be Jacqueline Fine. And of course, we have this handy dandy sheet that came with the expansions. And it tells you these are all the actions you can do. This is what happens with encounters. And this is when the mythos phase happens. It tells you what you're supposed to do there. So very handy little sheets that didn't come with the base game. I'm not sure which expansion they finally showed up in. Maybe Mountains of Madness? I can't remember. But anyway, good sheet to have as a little reference guide. Okay, up next is Jacqueline Fine. Her action is you may trade any number of clues with investigators on any space. So we could give her 1 clue to Trish. We could also take the clue Trish has and give it to Jacqueline. That might not be a bad idea now that I think about it, because Trish can spawn basically a clue every turn if she doesn't have one, And then Jacqueline can always use an action to take it from her, and building up a big pile of clues. So I think as a first action, Jacqueline Fine is going to do that. It says you may trade any number of clues with any investigator on any space. So she's going to take the clue from Trish that just got her clue. So that's her first action. For her second action, she will move to Arkham, getting one closer to the sea space, where she will probably try and go and investigate the Cthulhu Encounter. And so that's basically both characters taking their two actions. Up next is the encounter phase, and we'll be starting with our lead investigator, Trish. So come right back, and we're going to have an encounter. She can either have a generic city encounter, or she can have an encounter in Istanbul. All right, so we're going to have our first encounter starting with our lead investigator, Trish. She is up here in Istanbul, and she's going to have, you can either have a generic city encounter or the Istanbul encounter. She will have the Istanbul encounter. And we're going to look at the card here, the first one off the shuffle deck. Legend says that Hecate granted the city wealth and production. In an ancient underground chamber, you find a statue of the goddess. You may gain a dark pact condition to gain a promise of power condition and improve your influence. Oh my God. Oh, dark pacts are absolutely deadly in this game. I find to gain a promise of power condition and improve. And dark pacts are just not easily written off. They will come to reckoning. I think Trish is going to pass on this. It sounds wimpy, but that is, I think, just too deadly at the beginning of a Cthulhu playthrough to get a dark pact. Just not what we want to do. I don't think so. Trish is going to say thanks, but no thanks. I'll pass on the dark pact and the promise of power, and we'll just leave it at that. So it said you may. So that was very quickly Trish's encounter in Istanbul. And now we're going to be going over to Jacqueline Fine, and we'll come right back. She's going to have, I believe, an Arkham encounter, not a generic city encounter. Okay, it is time for Jacqueline Fine to have her Arkham encounter. And the reason I'm keeping the long focus on the big board here, not zooming in, is because my camera, if I zoom in too much and I try to focus on a card to read the text, it does not like to focus sometimes. So I apologize if you want to see things a little closer up. She's basically over here on Arkham, and we're going to have an Arkham encounter. So let's take a look at the card. So for Arkham, it says, you try to convince the manager of the first bank of Arkham to give you access to a particular safety deposit box. She needs to test influence -1. Well, that is pretty lame, because if we take a look at Jacqueline, her influence is only 2. 2 minus 1. You guessed it, that equates to 1 die. So I do have these funky Arkham Horror dice, so I'm going to use them for this playthrough. She gets to roll 1 die. We're looking for a success. Come on! And she rolls a 3. Now she could spend a clue token to re-roll it. And yeah, you know what? She's going to go ahead and spend one of the clue tokens. She's going to re-roll this. All right, we're going to try that again. She re-rolls. And she gets, all right, a 5, which is indeed a success. So the reroll paid off. And what does it mean if she succeeds? Let's have a look. If you pass, you find a legendary treasure. Gain 1 magical artifact. Wow! So she gets a magical artifact, which is really cool. So we're going to take the artifact deck, and we're going to keep flipping until we find some magical artifact. So what do we have here? It's an item tome. That's not a magical artifact. There it is, magical. She finds the silver key. Once per round, you may spend 1 less clue to pay for an effect. You may re-roll 1 die when resolving a test during an other-world encounter. Very cool. So she gets the silver key, which I do believe is pretty neat. So that's a pretty good thing for her to get for that encounter. So it was worth spending the clue token to get the silver key. All right, well, after that excitement, yes, we have to have our first Mythos phase. So we're going to come right back. We're going to flip the built Mythos deck and see what horror befalls Trish and Jacqueline for the first round. All right, so we're on to the fun part of the game against Cthulhu. Our first Mythos card. Oh, God, this sucks. Okay, we're going to spawn clues to start with. That's the first thing we're going to do. And, of course, in a two-player game, we're going to spawn one clue. So let's figure out where that clue is going to be spawned. We take a random clue, and it is going to show up in Shanghai. And where do we have Shanghai? Is right here. So we have a clue in Shanghai. Continuing on, space number 3. Okay, where is space number 3? It's right here. Of course, it's right on the very edge of the board. You can just barely see it. So we're actually going to take one of these tokens and we're going to put it on space 3 so we know where this is going to take effect. I'm probably going to put the card there as well. Each night you dream of strange architecture built from massive green stones. When you awake, you find yourself walking toward the sea. How very Cthulhu appropriate. Oh, and it's one of the red tentacle cards, which are really nasty. Madness from the sea, ongoing rumor. As an encounter, an investigator on space 3 may search the corpse city of Riley for the cause of the maddening dreams. He may spend clues equal to the number of investigators to solve this rumor. He may spend one fewer clue for each sanity token on this card. Sanity token on this card. And if it's a reckoning happening, place a sanity token on this card. Then each investigator loses one sanity for each sanity token on this card. So it's going to start with no sanity, but as it sits here and goes on and on and on, it will gain sanity tokens. And of course, every time a reckoning happens, for every sanity token, each investigator must lose a sanity. So we're going to have to get over to this place and put 2 clue tokens on it to solve this rumor, or eventually it will drive us insane. So I'm going to put the card actually on the board here to remind myself of what we're supposed to be doing. There it is. So that's the first Mythos phase. Now, nobody has 2 clue tokens, but of course we know Trish can gain a clue token if she doesn't have one, and Jacqueline can just take clue tokens from Trish. So if Jacqueline can get down here before this gets out of control, can take care of it. Of course, we also need to take care of the stars. All right, our first mystery for Cthulhu. So this is Eldritch Horror. We're playing against Cthulhu. We're playing with Trish Scarborough and Jacqueline Fine. And I don't know what our start is like. I think we're doing okay. We haven't died yet. Of course, it's only the first round. So thanks so much for watching along. Thanks for your subscriptions, your comments, your likes. I really appreciate it. This is Eldritch Horror with everything thrown into the mix. And we have our 2 ladies trying to thwart Cthulhu from rising from the seas and taking over the world. So thanks so much for watching along. Join me next time for the continuation of Eldritch Horror, Trish and Jacqueline against Cthulhu.